Jessica, awesome to have time with you today. Thanks so much for your generosity and being here, and welcome to the Happy Engineer podcast.
I'm excited to be on. Thank you for having me.
I have had an incredibly fun time getting to know you. We're both part of the world's best mastermind and have heard all of the amazing things that you're doing and got exposed to your work and your message and your mission. And I will say you're the only person I've ever met whose email signature is toes on the keyboard. And I love it. I love it. And so obviously the elephant in the room, the thing that everybody stands out immediately when we get to know you and your life is that you were born without arms. And all of the things that you've accomplished in the context of that for most of the world is awe-inspiring and just absolutely amazing. I want you to share with us as we just jump into this, what is the first question that everybody who meets you when you're on tour and doing keynotes and everything, what does everybody ask first when they see you and your life story and your work? What's that first obvious question people ask?
Wow, that always varies. If it's a young person, like a child, children don't have any filters, which is what I absolutely love about them. And we kind of lose that as an adult. It's along the lines of what happened, or, why don't you have
Sure.
arms? How do you do anything? And then adults, like, oh, sometimes, you have more extroverted adults who will say comments that are a little condescending at times. And it's not intended to be that way, but, it really catches people off guard in the public to see someone who lives and functions independently, might I say,
Yeah.
without arms and does everything to get by, to get to the grocery store, from driving a car to carrying groceries to the cash register to taking out her credit card to make the purchase. And all this for a first timer is a lot to take in. So I understand and I have empathy for that initial shock factor, the shock value that I provide to people. But I find it entertaining at times, sometimes a little exhausting.
Yeah.
In all
Yeah.
honesty, sometimes a blessing in a way that I can educate and advocate for those who are different and have this unique opportunity to really bring light to so much. So I think it's
Yeah.
it's definitely, to answer your question in a very long-winded way. It varies. That's the answer to that question. It depends on
Sure.
who it is who sees me for the first time.
I can definitely relate to feeling like I'm not equipped to know what to say or what to ask when I meet someone with any kind of disability that I'm not familiar with or have never seen before, or you just don't want to offend and you don't know what to say. And I'm curious if you could provide some quick coaching for us. Like when somebody is in that place, whether it's, physical apparent disability or limitation like what you have, or do you have some coaching, some guidance for us on how to step into that atmosphere?
I think it's just be real and don't hold back. Don't feel like, oh, am I going to offend them? Don't be too concerned. Be a human being. And I think that's ultimately what people with visual differences want. They want to be treated like a human being. And that's where, again, like I said earlier, children have no filters, so they do that right away. But as an adult, there's those filters that develop as we mature, that we don't want to offend somebody, but then it's like maybe someone's trying so hard that what they end up saying is more condescending than just saying hi, or whoa, that's a surprise, or wow,
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone quite like you before. Something like that. Whatever is natural. Well, I have to make sure that I clearly communicate that every person with a disability or visual difference has a different opinion about this. Some people maybe
Okay.
perhaps who've lost a limb or have been injured and are in a wheelchair or have something that sets them apart from others may not want to have to rehash everything that
Sure.
may have caused their condition. For me, I was born this way, so this is all I've ever known. Not having arms is my everyday life. In fact, I forget that I don't have arms, and it isn't until people remind me that I am missing arms that I'm like, oh yeah, I am different. So
Wow.
it's very different for the individual. And I always say, just be honest, just be real. And whatever it is that you have to say or want to say, don't hold it back. I think more offensive than saying something that may not come out exactly right is someone who pretends you're not even there or
Oof.
pretends and ignores everything that comes to them in that moment. And that's a dishonest interaction that I always discourage.
Thank you for that. I'm encouraged. And it is not just for these visual differences where that advice is really important. I think we could kind
Yeah.
of copy and paste that into a lot of different situations, but I really appreciate you sharing that with me. Jessica, one of the things you shared, it's in your book, and I'm going to pull out a few points from that. And I will highlight everyone, Jessica's book, Disarm Your Limits is the title. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. Go get a copy. It's an extraordinary read. There's something that was really touching for me in your book. It's right at the beginning about how people ask you about how you've turned a disability into a part of your message and mission in this transformational way. And you mirror back to them that in many ways, we all have part of us that was born without arms. Would you explain that message and the heartbeat of that for me and for the engineering leader listening?
We all have something, whether that's not having arms, whether that's being born into poverty or not having supportive family members or feeling like we could use more confidence in our life. We all have something that we're either lacking or want more of, or something that we see as being could be a potential setback or a disadvantage. And that's what I like to say to people. And in that book that I wrote, and it's been many years now, basically reminding people that while I don't have arms, there's something that they're faced with, and equally that they have in their life.
The emotional side of this versus the physical. Can you describe what that journey is like for you? So physically, you've overcome obstacle after obstacle after obstacle that the world would look at and call obstacles in the physical world. But what's on the inside? What's going on? Because what you're describing, it's like, yeah, we all have that in our minds and in our hearts in some way. What's that journey been like for you?
People, really get caught up on that difference that they see. And that's why I really appreciate this, Zach. I appreciate your recognition. I could sit here and talk to you all day long about, okay, this is how I tie my shoelaces, this is how I brush my teeth in the morning, this is how I did the dishes last night. I could go on and on and on, and how I've engineered my own life in a way without arms. But what people fail to recognize, which is something that everyone relates to, it resonates with everyone, is the emotional challenge of being different. And the emotional challenge everyone relates to on a certain level. And for me, on an extreme level, because my difference is so blatant. And as a result, it has caused interactions in my life that haven't always been supportive, and emotionally has been difficult for me to overcome, in the way that I had to understand that the world's not always going to be fully accepting of my difference. And I recognize that. But ultimately, it's my journey and it's my job to be the best version of myself and rise to the occasion for those moments when maybe someone's not understanding and says something very condescending to me, like, oh, that must be such a rough life or something like that. But I can rise to the occasion and say, it's really not that tough. You could do it too. Or if you were really put up to the test, you could do the same things. So that emotional challenge of being different and constantly engaging with people on a regular basis that may not be as understanding or empathetic and are more pitying and condescending, getting through those daily interactions, especially as a young person, was hard to do. Now as an adult, it happens every day when I go out, and I deal with that with a smile on my face. But as a young person, very lacking and very poorly equipped with that confidence, with that maturity, and to be able to deal with that when people who are older than you, who are supposed to know better, will tell you things like, oh, you're handicapped, or, oh, yeah, you can't do that. But being constantly told that over a series of years as a young person has a certain effect on someone.
Yes. I'm just thinking of the myriad ways that what you just said shows up in the lives of people who physically don't have any disability, but then they become clients of mine as highly paid, quote unquote, successful engineers. And there's some part of them that a parent or a teacher or a close, someone they respected spoke that same sort of limitation into their life. Instead of saying you're handicapped, it was, you're dumb, or you're not this, or nobody likes you, or whatever. And they carry that for a long time. And kind of like you described, with somebody, maybe they look at you with a look of shock or just surprise, and it's an immediate reminder of like, oh, I forgot, people see me this way. And these other leaders are walking around in situations that are reminding them of that wound on the inside, on their heart every day, and carrying that. And I think the difference is, you have created such resilience and courage and strength to not let other people's reminding you or trying to put you in that box. Like, you're not going to let them. I want to bring that power to the engineering leader who's listening today, because there's so much there. And maybe to start, there's a story from your book that I think sets an important tone for this conversation, and it was really great. The title was The TV Thief. If I remember right, you were in college and had gotten an apartment and you had no television. Would you tell us that story?
Sure.
What happened?
Oh, everyone loves that story, and I'm glad you bring that up because it's such a good visual. Because, like you said, sometimes we live within our boxes and or put people in a box. And I was moving out of college, and we all love that time in our life when we have this just surge of independence. I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to live on my own. I'm going to conquer the world. We're just at that age in life. And I was ready to move out of my parents' house. And I had everything set up to live independently in an apartment. I had some roommates to help me pay rent, but we didn't have a television. So I called up my mom, and she was working at the time. So she didn't have the time to talk to me. I said, Mom, can I borrow one of the TVs? She said, just go home and check in with Dad. And I went home to Dad, and he is retired. He stays at home all day. And he immediately said, I don't know about that. I don't think you should borrow one of the TVs. And that basically, I know what that means. That. Yeah, that means no.
Yeah, that's
you
dad
can't borrow
talk
a
for
TV.
Not happening.
Yeah, exactly. And so I said, well, and for me, telling me no is basically like a challenge. I don't know if my dad knew that I was going to attempt to move a TV by myself that day. But when he went out to water the plants, I tore the house apart looking for something to help me move a 32-inch tube television out of my parents' house with enough time that my dad wouldn't notice. And so I went through the house looking for something with wheels, and I came across a dolly and a skateboard and all this other stuff. And I realized, there it is. It's a chair with wheels. It was a computer chair like what we're sitting on right now. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to move this TV. And I was so determined that I never thought of this as being an impossible task. It was just about, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to do this quickly without damaging the TV? So I had to get that TV on the chair somehow, using my shoulders and my legs and kicking it off that stand and getting it. It wasn't a flat screen or anything. It was one of those tube televisions.
Oh, wow.
Back in the day. And I managed to get on this chair.
Those are heavy. Those are quite heavy.
Yeah, and they were
Jessica.
heavy. It wasn't just a TV. It was a TV/VCR, one of those.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was even heavier. And I remember just getting it off the stand on the chair, and I got it out. And it was one of those classic moments where, like, I did it. I can't believe I did this. I got to the very, very end. And when I got to my car with this TV on a chair, guess who was standing right there? And it was my dad. And it was just timing. It was perfect timing for him to see me sweating, driven to get this TV out, stealing a TV from the living room. And he looked at me and he said, oh my gosh, if I'd known you wanted it that bad, I could have helped you. There was a moment of, if you really are driven enough, and you'll figure out a way.
There's two golden nuggets in that story beyond just the visual of, like, if I tied my hands behind my back and had to move a 32-inch cathode ray tube, I'm not sure. That's intense. But the first thing you said, when you hear a no, for you, that's a challenge. Tell me more about that principle in your life.
if you were to probably see someone without arms and you've never known my story, I think that the automatic assumption would be no, you can't do the
Can't do that.
things. Yeah. And so that is what I was faced with since day one. And I had to learn at a very young age that people are going to tell me no, and that it's going to be my opportunity to say yes and watch me. So it was an adapted necessity that I had to develop as a young person to survive and for survival. And it turned out to be a great asset because as an adult, there were a lot of things stacked against me. And that's true for anyone. But I had a better system in place and years of practice with my resilience that it
Yeah.
was easier. It's easier in a way for me now as an adult because of what I had to deal with as a young person.
Before I leave this, I am curious for those of us who are adults and didn't have that kind of mindset and opportunity to overcome. Well, let me rephrase that. We had a lot of opportunities too, but we didn't because we didn't have that kind of mindset and intensity and drive. What would you say to somebody who does not think that way today? Is that something you would recommend they go pursue? Like, look, stop taking no as the final answer. And if so, how do they begin to shift to thinking and believing the way you do?
I think it starts with stretching people's comfort zones by doing things that they wouldn't necessarily do, by being uncomfortable in a position that makes it a learning experience. So, seeking out those opportunities to build your resilience, to make yourself uncomfortable, to go to maybe another country and have to fend for yourself and deal with a challenge or be confronted with something that makes you a little scared. It will really bring out such resilience and character.
I agree. We could almost end the podcast right now. It's like, yes, that is so good. And I love, so the second point I mentioned, there's two golden nuggets to me in the story. I love how you said, I turned my dad's no into a yes because of my determination, my desire to make this happen. He's like, if I knew it was this important to you, I would have given it to you right out of the gate. I'm curious for you, like, is there any reason why you think humans are so drawn into the passion and drive and determination of someone? So in this case, it's you influencing your dad's decision or his support of you. And I think you've proven it over and over again in your journey, but it's true in a lot of stories. We could pick different examples where someone's singular determination and desire changes someone else's perspective to say, well, I'm going to support you. There's just something about that draws us in. Why do you think that is?
I think it boils down to the why as well as to the individuals why they're doing something. If someone is so passionate, so driven, so convicted in doing something, it's contagious. And if you can find that with whatever it is you're doing, you will create followers along the way or people who want to be a part of it and enrolled or engaged with it. So each individual has their own why and their own passion for doing something. And if it's authentic with that person, then other people will see that and be excited. Like, how is this person so excited about this? I got to get involved with this or do this. And you can't help but want to share it with someone. And that's, I think, what makes other people really want to get on board with what you're doing.
Totally. Totally. I love that. The contagious effect. I feel that even with you, like I watch what you're doing and it makes me want to support you. It's like, I've got my own thing over here, but just when I'm with you, I feel that energy. I feel it right now. In your own journey, Jessica, has that been natural for you? It always, we found that place of here's my why and my purpose and the desire and the drive just flows? Or do you have to nurture that and take care of that? It's not always present. And if so, how do you do that?
I think that definitely everyone has to nurture their why to a certain level and really reconnect with the purpose of what they're doing and if it's alignment with what they want to accomplish. It's not always easy because we get distracted easily. I get distracted very easily. So keeping focus is something that you have to do by either nurturing it through meditation, thinking things through, reflection, giving some time to yourself to visualize what you're trying to do. I'm very much a visual person, and I believe in that, and it keeps you on target.
I love that. So, Jessica, we could pick from dozens of really amazing aspects of your story, but the one that you are best known for, the engineer in me, and certainly the engineering leaders in the Happy Engineer audience will appreciate going deeper into you being the first armless pilot and your love for aviation and flying. And really quick, I'm curious, what was it first that prompted you to choose, I want to be a pilot? Where did the seed of that get planted?
Well, the seed of wanting to fly was that desire as a child to break free of the limitations that people put on me. I'm sure there are a ton of children out there that have the superhero vision of being the one to save the day, and they want that sense of empowerment for one reason or another. For me, it was because limitations were put on me, and I wanted to break free of that. So for me, it was as a child envisioning that I could fly over my playground. I'm sure there are other children who envision those superhero type images. I wanted to do that so much that I didn't know then as a young person that it would translate to me becoming a pilot and doing something that no one had ever done before, learning to fly a plane with my feet. But going back to what makes you feel uncomfortable, flying made me very uncomfortable. It was terrifying. And
As a
I
passenger, you mean?
as a
to
passenger.
Just be, okay.
Yes. And being in a commercial plane as a child, I was terrified. So I didn't know how it was going to translate to becoming a pilot in command of an aircraft. It's interesting how I wanted to conquer my fear as well. Conquering my fear was something that I thought could align with what I do as a speaker and speak all over the world and share that message that you shouldn't let fear stand in the way of an opportunity. And so I went out there and did it for two purposes: breaking free of the limitations that others put on me as a young person, and to speak to that for other people with disabilities around the world, to show that disability doesn't mean inability, and also to help others who battle with their own fears and showing that you can conquer your fear.
Let's talk about fear for a second. My company, Jessica's Oasis of Courage, and I hold this belief that's really aligned with what you just said, that while fear wears 1,000 different masks in our life, the thing that holds the engineering leaders back from the success and the happiness and the fulfillment that they dream about, who end up working with OACO, it's you don't have the courage to face those fears and take action, even though you think it's a technical problem, or you think it's an executive communication problem, or we have our intellectual ways of describing fear, but I think it's a root cause of what holds us back in life. And so can you just tell us your perspective about the role that fear is playing in holding us back, and what is courage, and how all this looks in your own journey, or how would you describe that to someone just from what you've discovered?
Oh, well, one of the things I love to share is that, true courage, in my opinion, is being so confident in my own skin, in my own body, that the threat of rejection doesn't pose a barrier to me. And that was something I had to learn, that definition of courage and what it means to me in being confident in living out my life. And it definitely comes out in different ways, like flying planes and doing these things that are kind of on the edge, like surfing or skydiving, and doing these things that most people wouldn't always jump at or be excited about. But I really love it. It energizes me in a way to do something that scares me a little, and then
Yeah.
to get on the other side of fear and said, yeah, I was afraid, but I did it. And this surge of confidence comes from that.
Would you please say that definition again? Because that was really powerful and unique from what a lot of guests on our show share about what courage is.
Courage for me personally is having the confidence to be proud of the person I am and in my own skin, regardless of the threat of rejection.
Ooh, that is so good. You're triggering for me something one of my mentors shared with me that I think is so true, and it's not common to discuss, that lots of people say and think and truly believe that they're afraid of failure, but it's not really failure that tends to stand in the way. It's the rejection and the social consequence of being seen as a failure, of other people looking at me as a failure, that I'm actually afraid of. The judgment, the rejection, the shame. And I think your definition is so spot on. If you're a courageous leader, it's such a deep confidence that that threat won't stop you. I'm so jazzed by this, by that definition. I love that. And actually, I wrote this down. A bunch of quotes from your book that were really powerful. I just captured in case they came up or I wanted to go deeper. And one of this is a perfect fit. You said, "My commitment to become a pilot was an act of courage." Most people don't think about a commitment as courageous. They would say, well, you did it. You flew the plane. You became the pilot. That was courageous. But you said your commitment to do it was courageous. Can you draw a distinction for us? Why is commitment an act of courage?
Well, commitment for me is definitely not just saying I'm going to do it, but taking on something and really fully doing it to the end. A lot of times we say yes to a lot of things, but whether that's committed or not, or are we fully in it? Are we truly doing this? Or are we just saying something? I think that all that has to come into play when you make a commitment to do something.
All the way. All the way. I love this. So, Armless Pilot, and I want to put the link to your documentary in the show notes, and I encourage people, if you want to go explore Jessica's whole story, go watch and read the book and get into it, because you won't regret investing that time. It's so, so powerful. But I would love to spend some time talking about your current project with a plane designed for someone who's flying with their feet. Tell us what's going on there, set the stage, and where we're at with all that work you're doing.
Okay, so we are so excited because we just found out the horizontal stabilizer and another part of the airplane is finished, but we are taking on building a kit airplane, which for those who are not familiar with building a plane, kit planes take about 2,000 hours to build. Some people say you build one airplane a lifetime. Other pilots have proven differently, or mechanics have proven differently. They've built one or two or three or four planes, depending on how many hours you have and you want to put into it. Well, we wanted to build an RV-10 airplane, which is a 4-seater kit airplane, and not only build it with those 2,000 hours, but also modify the left seat, because the left seat is a pilot command seat. Typically, you can fly from the right seat because there's dual controls, but we're going to make it so that the left seat can be flown with just feet. This will be the first plane in history that can be designed in that way so that someone can comfortably fly. I know you're probably wondering, well, don't you already fly a plane? Yeah, I do fly a plane with my feet, but it is in a very precarious way, with my feet up on the yoke, which is like the steering wheel, my other foot on the throttle, which is like the gas, and precariously, with a lot of ab work, I use my legs to control a plane. But now we're building a plane that will be comfortable for foot flight, for bipedal flight, so that I can put my feet on the floor and in a relaxed position, fly the plane in a way that has never been done before. And that's what's the exciting project. We are calling Project 2025, the impossible airplane. If you break down impossible, it's I'm possible. And people can follow it on the impossibleairplane.com.
This is so fun. And really quick, because people are, if they're not familiar with your story, they probably are wondering, so what kind of plane did you fly already? Can you really quickly explain, there's only a couple of models that have that up, as far as rudder, et cetera, just really quick for people who don't know.
Sure. The plane that I'm certified to fly right now is called an Ercoupe airplane. It's a 1945 post-World War II, so it's like a vintage plane. All the basic controls. But what's unique about this plane, it is the only airplane that was designed in the 30s and 40s, well, designed in the 30s, built in the 40s, that can have essentially two limbs, can fly a plane because the ailerons and rudders are interconnected. I know that sounds like weird for some people who are not familiar with airplane design, but it's essentially allowing for dual control of an airplane versus you sit in an airplane at the nearest airfield. It's probably a Cessna, and it requires all four limbs. It requires the feet on the pedals, the hand on the yoke, and the other hand on the throttle. Well, this plane, the Ercoupe, was designed so you can fly it with just two active limbs on the controls.
Yeah.
So that's why I can use both feet.
It's really amazing to see the pictures. To your point about precarious position, it definitely is precarious. So, and you can geek out with the happy engineers because most folks are going to know what an aileron is, and if they don't, they're the kind of people who are going to go find out after this episode. And so,
Great.
Tell us from a design perspective, what is at least high level, the intention for the new design? Can you tell us, like, how are you handling? Are you separating rudders and ailerons on this plane, and there's multiple pedals, or like how are you all solving this problem?
Well, we're trying to bring the controls for simplifying as well, but keeping the three axis of control, which is typical. So we're going to bring the controls not only down on the floor, but we're going to design it. Of course, this is a team of people, team of engineers from like the University of Arizona, some engineers who have these creative ideas that have come together. One in particular who is amazing. He's using a 3D printer to do some of these mock-ups and things. But they're going to be essentially so that I can use my legs on what kind of like a joystick, where I can move it around. And while this is on the floor, it's just a rod on the floor, and I'm moving it around by either using my toes. We're probably going to do some controls with my toes, but say, for example, moving my legs forward and back and twisting my legs like maybe you would, I don't know how to compare this, but anyway, so I'm using my leg movements to activate these controls on the airplane.
It's amazing. I'm so excited to see this come to life. And tell us, Jessica, what does the project need most? Where do you all need the most help? Just in case some happy engineer out there listening, has a solution or a great idea, they can reach out and share with you. Where are you at, and what do you need the most help with?
We need a lot of help, and we've already had a wonderful volunteer who's building the standard kit in New Jersey with his EAA, Experimental Aviation Association chapter. And that's being built, which is a huge chunk. I mean, that's 2,000 hours. But the designs themselves are where we need some creatives, some people who have these ideas, who may have some aeronautical knowledge or maybe a pilot themselves, and see how this can work together. So that's why we have some input that we can receive on the website, theimpossibleairplane.com, as well as people who may want to help us in other capacities. We need support all around because it is pretty ambitious, and it's going to take at least 2.5 years to do so.
Amazing. So, if you want to, the happy engineer listening right now, if you want to be a part of this journey and share ideas, please hit the website, reach out to Jessica, and put more wind in their sails, so to speak, to get this done. And I can't wait to see it. It's going to be amazing. I'd love to spend more time digging into the nerdy stuff, Jessica, because it's so fun. But I do want to be respectful of your time and maybe land the plane here on our conversation. But tell me, for you, what is it in your heart that you really want people to know? When you think about your life and your story and the work you do as an amazing keynote speaker and in motivational speaking, and if you were going to boil it down, what do you want us to know?
That's a wonderful question, and I could probably spend all day answering it. I think I'm going to, since we last spoke about the airplane, I'm going to talk about what we want the world to know by building this plane and how we want to get the message out there that disability doesn't mean inability. And disability is definitely, defined in one's own interpretation. So we're getting this airplane out and designing something that's never been done before so that we can fly it around and target those like children who are very, they're very impressionable.
Yeah.
And helping them to see what's possible in their lives, children with disabilities, children who've been limited or labeled, and also ultimately change that perspective society's expectations for them, because I have been given opportunities from getting an education, getting a degree in college, starting my own business, flying a plane, and the list goes on. And I've been held back to a certain degree, but then again, having the right attitude has allowed me to go forward and do things. But there are really places in the world where people with disabilities are not even allowed to go to school. They're institutionalized still, where people with disabilities are not allowed to have a job or have these basic needs met or not considered worthy of being loved. And it's just really important to get the message out to the world that they are worthy of being loved and worthy of doing these incredible things. I think this airplane is going to be a means of getting the message around the world.
I'm a little glassy-eyed here hearing you describe that. And yes, worthy, just as worthy as any other soul on this planet. So thank you, Jessica. That's really powerful. I don't normally do this, and for the happy engineer out there, Jessica did not ask me to do this, but you have a not-for-profit organization as part of what you do. Is that right?
Yes.
So if someone feels inspired, maybe they're not in aerospace or aeronautical engineering, but they just want to support that message in the world, can they write a check and just say, please continue and do more? What would that look like if someone wants to support you financially?
Wow. Well, that would mean I appreciate the question, because of course we have to be able to cover that as well, to be able to do these wonderful things, to be able to reach people in other countries and around the world. And we have a 501c3, Right Footed Foundation International. And you can go to my website, jessicacox.com, and find out more about that. So feel free to visit there and reach out to us. We're very accessible all over the web, and whether it's social media or the website for direct contact, feel free to reach out, and I would appreciate all the support. We're on this mission to really change the world in that perspective.
Amazing. And for everyone out there, your company may have matching or have opportunities to be a part of that as well. So if you feel inspired to support Jessica and the work they're doing, please do take action. Don't sit on that. Jessica, thank you so much for your time. And I always end in the same place here, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts. But one of the beliefs that I hold is that great engineering, just like great coaching, has in common that questions lead, answers follow. And if we want better answers in our lives, we want to ask better questions. And so for the happy engineer who's out there, they've been listening to this conversation, they want to shift from that impossible, limited type of thinking to anything's possible. The things I dream about, I can achieve. What would be the best question that you would lead them with today?
Something that came to mind right away is, what's holding you back?
I love it. What's holding you back? There you go. Engineers, go ask the question. Jessica, thank you so much. This has been absolutely tremendous, and I do look forward to having you back on the show to share about your first flight in the new plane when we get that far into the future, and hopefully much sooner than that, to continue to support and discover more about your incredible journey. And just thank you so much for making time today. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you for what you do.
Hello, my friend. Zach White here again, and I wanted to let you know that's all we've got for this episode of the Happy Engineer podcast. Thank you so much for investing your time with me today. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to bring you this content. Just as a reminder, it would be amazing if you would subscribe and share this episode with any other engineers you know who may benefit from this. And if you're like me, I hope that you'll take some notes and, more importantly, take action. In our audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts and any place that you go to find podcasts, there's a little more content from me about this episode in the debrief. If you really want to hear about how to put this into action, I'd encourage you to go grab that. But thank you for joining us for the video version of our interview today. And again, can't thank you enough for helping us to get the word out about the Happy Engineer podcast and what we're doing. If there's any way we can serve you, would love to do that. go find us at oasisofcourage.com or reach out to me on social media at Oasis of Courage. And don't forget again to subscribe and click the bell to have notifications of upcoming releases of new episodes of the podcast. As always, I want to leave you with this. If you stay in your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. So let's crush comfort, create courage, and let's do this.